Well, hello. My name is Chuck Champlin. I'm the author of the book Wand that we're going to be talking about today. And I am 70 years old, I'm happy to say, and in very good health, but have been an author for a number of years and also a corporate communications executive for the Walt Disney Company, and have had really an exciting and wonderful career. I was very fortunate to be raised by a father who worked for Time and Life magazines, so he took me to a number of places around our world. I was born in Chicago. I lived in London, England for a while, but I've lived now in Los Angeles for 50 years. I'm delighted to be here. And again, as I say, I'm the author of the book Wand, and I've also written another book called Think Like a Molecule. Both of these books are in some ways related because they're looking for ways to inspire our creative thinking. I wrote the book Wand back in 1989. I was inspired by a contest that Ted Turner, the creator of CNN, offered for a novel that would talk about themes related to the survival and the prosperity of our human civilization. I wrote that book within a year and had to turn it in by the deadline of December 31st that year, and therein lies a tale of adventure. But that book has been very meaningful to me, but I'm very pleased that Authors Press has brought it out now 30 years later in a published form. Very exciting. You can see the book here and the design of the cover featuring the Watts Towers, which feature in a major part of the book. So I look forward to talking to you about it, and I'll be answering some questions about it. Well, now we get into a very special part of this conversation today. We're going to have a conversation. I'm bringing in my daughter, Caroline, to talk about my book, Wand. Well, Caroline, it's just wonderful to be here in your apartment in Pasadena, and I'm very mindful of the fact that you were born in this city of Pasadena 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's true. It's wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here.
Just really nice to know that you read Wand, and I'm really curious to know what kind of questions you have about it.
Yeah, I have a bunch. You want to jump in?
Sure.
My big question is sort of what the specific prompt was for the contest, and like how you started rewriting once you knew what the prompt was.
Well, I was very impressed that Ted Turner, who's the founder of CNN, created what he called the Turner Fellowship Awards, and he offered $50,000 for a book that would meet the criteria of how does civilization prosper and get along. So I thought that was a worthy goal, and I wrote a novel to meet the requirements. Actually, it was $500,000 he was offering.
Wow.
So that was a pretty major motivation.
Yes, that's more tempting.
Absolutely.
So what did you do? Did you like map it out, or did it sort of just come to you as you wrote it?
You know, I really took the concept in my mind that I was just going to be venturing into the world to do this book, and so I made it that way for the hero of the book, a man named Chris Seisman, and he just ventures into the world because he's offered some money to go make the world a better place. So I mirrored my own experience in writing this book with the hero of this book.
Right. It's meta. It's very meta.
Meta, indeed, a meta universe.
Yeah, well, great. I'm wondering if I can ask you about sort of a major point in your book when there's this demonstration that Chris participates in. He sort of sets up a public video conference, I guess I would say, between Watts and Westwood. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, what inspired that scene. That I understand it's sort of based on something that actually happened, right?
Well, that's a great question, Caroline, and I really think that's part of the topic of this book, because in my mind, especially considering back in 1989, Watts, where this hole in space event took place, was considered outland for a lot of people in West Los Angeles. So I thought that linking Watts and near the Watts Towers, which you see on this poster, with people in Westwood would be a meeting of almost two civilizations that seemed to be very important. And using that concept of the hole in space, which is what that video link was all about, is almost like creating a great link.
I'm wondering, Dad, about the Watts Towers. I was actually talking to my brothers, and they remembered you taking them down to see the Watts Towers. towers, I think probably around the time that you were writing the book. Did you do some sort of research going down there to get the feel of the space?
Well, I was very inspired about the Watts Towers. Again, they're in this picture behind us. They're on the cover of the book because they were created by a strange little man who was like an Italian. He worked in plaster and so on, but he just had this vision to make these towers, and it's almost like a folk art kind of an experience. And I just liked the fact of that, and they really are one of the icons in Los Angeles for people from away from the well-to-do in Beverly Hills or downtown. But it's just that the one man and one artisan made these towers, and they've been iconically part of Los Angeles for 70 years or something. At one point, the city of Los Angeles was very worried whether they were strong enough to stand up, so they actually attached a wire to the top of one of the towers and tried to pull it down, and I think the wire actually broke. You could hardly believe that. So the towers ended up being so much more sturdy and more durable than the city and the engineers had actually expected. So to me, that's an even more dramatic expression of the power of the individual to create art or to create symbolic images that kind of again are part of what I hope is at the heart of the book, of the book Wand. And it seemed like, again, also an iconic place to establish a conversation between the Watts community, which is thought of as a very poor part of Los Angeles, off to Westwood, which is thought of as a very well-to-do part of our city.
Right.
So that was a very symbolic gesture for me to create that in the book. And I think it works well, and I'm delighted to have this become part of the iconic kind of marketing of this book Wand. Well, Caroline, that is just absolutely helpful to me. I'm just curious whether you felt that that kind of thing came out of the book. Did you see that sense of two worlds trying to connect?
Oh yeah, I think there was a lot of different sort of two worlds scenarios in the book. I feel like there was sort of a division between like a pacifist group and sort of a more militant group in the book. I felt like there were lots of different sort of tensions going on. I'm wondering what the inspiration for that was. It sort of seemed like a MLK sort of Malcolm X rivalry almost between these two groups.
There were, and I think that was one of the things that I was trying to explore, is that there is an activism to try and make our society better, but there are a lot of different dimensions. And Chris Walkman, the hero, becomes a little concerned about the violence that one of the groups seems to be espousing. And to me, it's very surprising that seems so relevant to today, that we have a lot of people that seem edging towards violence. We saw in the January 6th thing or some other kinds of outreaching things. Right,
yeah. This is very topical. I'm wondering about sort of the relevance in terms of Zoom, like you mentioned earlier. Do you think, because you wrote this when the internet really wasn't a thing yet, I'm wondering if you think there's still something for people to take away from it, even when a hole in space is sort of a daily occurrence now.
Well, I think there is. I think there was a story in the paper, the New York Times, just recently about, are we ready to have a civil war in this country? And I think that if we can just learn to be tolerant and learn to be compassionate and understand about walking in somebody else's moccasins, that there's a greater chance for understanding. Do you think that's true? And do you think that's possible?
I don't know, but I would caution against that phraseology. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. I don't think we're on the verge of civil war, hopefully, but yeah, no, I definitely get that. I think it just proves that your book is still relevant in lots of ways.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the things that makes me excited about having it come out through Authors Press now, is that there's a lot to talk about, and even just the possibilities of how does our technology help us better. You worked a lot in radio. You must have had senses and feelings about the importance of media, whether people are able to be changed by articles and stories and media that they come across.
Right.
Do you have an experience that might be true?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure, yeah, certainly all the time people were, told me that they were helped by articles that our outlets put out. But I think that that's the sort of the tension around the media was another sort of aspect of the book. I feel like there was some, maybe because you've been on two sides of the media, sort of as a journalist and then as a communications guy, you've seen, I feel like there's this sort of a tension there that I noticed. I feel like you had some doubts about whether the media, I don't know, is all good.
Well, the media sometimes, if it bleeds, it leads, they'll say, and there's always a tension about whether the media perhaps is fostering or fomenting divisions more than helping to unify. So do you think that the media has a role to play? And one of the points about Wand is that there are towers up on the hills around our city broadcasting, and those are like magic wands because they have tremendous power.
Well, one question I have, Dad, is about sort of this story about how you got the story, your piece, your novel submitted actually for the contest. I understand that was itself sort of a bit of a debacle. Can you talk about what happened?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the key parts of this book is that Chris Walkman hires a homeless person thinking, well, that's a good thing to do, right? I mean, you saw this homeless person became kind of a buddy of his and almost like an alter ego in a way. And it became key because the story just quickly is that the book had to be submitted for the contest by December 31st, midnight. And when I went to the downtown post office, I found that it was closed and it was just before midnight. But luckily, a homeless person came out of the woods to tell me, you gotta take this down to Los Angeles International Airport to get it turned in on time.
Right. Well, my last question for you, Dad, I'm wondering what's next? Are you in the mood sort of for fiction again now that you've revisited this work, or what are you considering in terms of next writing projects?
Well, I think my number one job is to write a memoir. I think the job of a writer is to really convey their life, their values, their experience, to be helpful to the world. And I feel like pursuing that contest for me and pursuing other things that I've done, my other book, Think Like a Molecule, everybody has life stories and lessons that they should get down on paper. So you, for instance, have got a great story, or your wonderful boyfriend Will has got an amazing series of stories. So every single person has a life story that I think they should be required on a national basis to put into the archives and have all of us tell our stories. So I hope to at least do that for my story.
Yeah, well, very exciting. I'd love to read it, of course.
And I think your experience as a journalist, you've asked all sorts of people about their stories, and I hope that that's been meaningful to you, and I know it's been meaningful to the people you spoke to. So.
Right.
So you're going to write your memoir too, I hope.
Not yet. No, I still have time. I still have time to gather the stories.
But I think, the idea of calling a book Lessons Learned, whatever it would be.
Maybe a title.
It just would be really great, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's exciting. Yeah, I'd love to read it. Well, I'm just grateful that we have this book to read, that it's not just sort of on the computer somewhere, that it's actually a physical copy to read. I'm just proud. It's awesome that you've written a book. That seems like an absolutely challenging task, and I'm glad that the fruit of it exists.
Right. Well, I must say that the process of writing the book was such an interesting adventure journey for myself, because I just simply felt like I was this character and I was pushing him through with the kind of goals that I would have had personally, and leading him into adventures, and I sort of reacting for him as I probably think I would have reacted in those situations. Did that sort of come across?
Oh yeah, no, I totally felt like it was you. That you were it has all of your, as Leslie has said, as your wife has said, that it's has all of your classic wordplay in it. It's very it's pretty transparently you, but I think that's nice. I think that's what makes it special, is that you can sort of see the side of you, of my dad, that I haven't seen before. Sort of like an interesting distance that I think is fun to read.
Well, Caroline, I can't say enough thank you for your time here, and I can't tell you what a pleasure and a proud moment it is for me to know that you read this book, that you're asking such meaningful questions, and that it really deepens our relationship. I know you're an extremely smart young lady, and just to have that pride of fatherhood interacting with you in this way is just a great moment.
So. Of course. Yeah, I have to read it, of course.
Really
yeah,
good.
Thanks for having me.
also am very excited to have another guest here today to talk about Juan, Caroline's partner, Will Smith. So Will, a pleasure to have you here today.
Great to see you, Chuck.
Well, I'm just curious, you have read most of Juan, some of it. Do you have any impressions or key questions that you'd be interested in asking?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I loved about the book was just the image of Los Angeles in the 1980s. You know, I've been in the city for just a few years, but it was clearly written by someone who lived in LA, and seeing it through kind of the 1980s camera was really fun as a reader. You know, the smog and the traffic, which has lessened up a little with the development of more efficient fuels.
Well, I'm going to say I just really appreciate you saying that, because it was a very vivid memory of mine. I used to work downtown Los Angeles and had taken buses along Venice Boulevard from the west side, and really appreciated my own experience in Los Angeles taking transportation.
So with Think Like a Molecule and now Wand, you've written both nonfiction and now a fiction book. What's the difference between those two mediums?
Well, that's a great question. Certainly for a nonfiction book, you want to be factual, you want to be accurate. You know, you've got a real world you're talking about, and so I tried to be as accurate with the science as I could. But with a fiction book like Juan, it's all imagination. Still, you're trying to describe places like being in Watts or being in Westwood, whatever. Make that as real as possible, because you really are trying to create a sense of reality. So you need to make references, but you're more free. I mean, I did feel like I was pressing forward on an adventure, like walking into unexplored territory, so I kept surprising myself with what I was finding.
I'm curious to know what books and authors have been most inspirational to you as an author.
Well, one of my heroes is Buckminster Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome, and he was very much about imagination and building a new world. But obviously science fiction has been very important to me, so Isaac Asimov and people like that. But I also really like the heroes in journalism, like John Steinbeck or Dos Passos, or those kind of authors. But really enjoying, especially reading those science fiction, the world of the possible, the world of the imaginary, and so on. And then in art in general, I think the fact of Walt Disney having created such an amazingly complex world of creativity. I worked at Walt Disney Imagineering for a while, where you imagine things and you decide how you're going to engineer it. So to me, that's a big part of my hero pantheon.
Has anything changed in the story of Chris Walkman between the 1989 original manuscript and Wand being published today?
Pretty much not anything changed at all. I was so pleased to find how much the book resonated for me still today, 30 years later, in terms of the deal, more than ever, dealing with the issue of homeless people, dealing with the issue of how are we going to bridge the divides in our society. So those issues are still very much, and his exploration of what he could do. He was a guy that was raised on cartoons, and he thought our imaginations are such an amazing tool, we should use them better. And I think that gives him more important of an idea forever. And he was a guy that was discovering the possibility of injecting himself into society with his imagination. I hope that came across so much as he's saying, what can I do?
Do you have a message you'd like to share with those of us who'd like to read the book?
I think the message to me that is still very much with me, having written the book, was that there is a hopefulness about our civilization, and that we can figure out ways to make bridges, to figure out how to get along, either whether it's between Democrats and Republicans or between people in America and other nations. So I think that we can bridge the divide, and I think that that's what I'm really hopeful about.